They called him Achilles, but when Marcus and Sarah first saw this 110-pound German shepherd in a phoenix shelter, his spirit was more broken than any ancient myth. He was a fallen titan, staring at the concrete floor as if waiting for the earth to swallow him whole. Saving a giant who has already given up on existence requires a special kind of courage. Tell me, do you have the heart to save a giant who has already given up? Marcus and Sarah had moved to the scorching valley of Phoenix for their college years, hoping for a fresh start, but a spontaneous visit to a local high-kill shelter fundamentally altered their destiny. In the furthest, darkest corner of the facility, shrouded in a silence that felt heavier than the Arizona desert heat, sat Achilles. He didn't bark, he didn't whine, and he didn't beg for attention. He simply existed as a hollow ghost of a dog, trying to melt into the cold, cinder-block walls to become invisible. When Marcus asked about his history, the shelter worker's voice trembled with a volatile mixture of pity and repressed rage. Achilles had spent nearly a decade as a discarded breeding machine, locked inside a rusted wire cage for 23 agonizing hours a day. His entire world had been no larger than a coffin, and the physical evidence of this cruelty was horrifying. His massive paws were completely flat, a condition known as being flat-footed, because his bones had literally collapsed and spread out from years of standing on hard, unforgiving metal and concrete without a single second of grass beneath him. He walked with a heavy, soul-crushing limp that made every step look like a desperate battle against gravity itself. The shelter vet warned the couple that he was too old, too physically broken, and far too psychologically damaged for anyone to ever want him. Sarah looked into those deep, hollow eyes and saw oceans of abandonment and a decade of unanswered prayers etched into his weary face. Despite the limitations of their tiny apartment and the stern warnings that the dog was unadoptable, they knew they couldn't leave him behind. Before we continue, if heartwarming rescue stories like this one touch your soul, please subscribe. Your support means everything to forgotten souls like Achilles who are just waiting for a second chance. Hit that subscribe button right now. You won't regret it. Now back to what happened next. The first few weeks at home were a slow descent into the depths of his trauma. Achilles was terrified of the very air he breathed, flinching at every shadow and refusing to touch the expensive toys Marcus bought him because he simply didn't understand the concept of play. He remained a sentinel of sorrow, flinching whenever a door moved, as if expecting the cage to slam shut once again. The transition from the dusty, sun-bleached streets of Arizona to the high-altitude winters of Denver, Colorado, was a massive gamble that felt like a life-or-death mission for the small family. Marcus and Sarah packed their lives into a moving truck, with Achilles huddled in the back, his massive frame trembling with the agonizing fear that he was being returned to another prison. But then, the morning after they arrived in the mountains, something happened that defied every veterinary logic and left the couple speechless with wonder. A massive snowstorm had blanketed Denver in 2 feet of pristine white powder, the first snow Achilles had ever seen in his entire traumatized life. When Sarah opened the back door, expecting him to limp painfully toward the porch, the moment the icy mountain air hit his scarred muzzle, something ancient and primal ignited within his soul. His ears, which had been flattened against his head in submission for years, suddenly snapped to attention. He stepped onto the cold white surface, and for a heartbeat, time itself seemed to freeze. Then, without any warning, the 110-pound giant who could barely walk across a living room exploded into a magnificent display of motion. He didn't just walk, he launched himself into the deep drifts like a black and tan missile of pure energy. He was running, actually running, despite the limp, despite the flat feet, and despite the years of muscle atrophy that should have kept him grounded forever. Marcus stood there with tears streaming down his face, watching this broken hero leap through the air like a puppy who had just discovered that joy was finally allowed. It wasn't just physical movement, it was a frantic, joyful rebellion against every second he had ever spent behind rusted bars. Closer, faster, stronger, he pushed his body through the freezing white sea, his tail wagging so violently his entire skeletal frame shook with a rhythmic, beautiful euphoria. The soft, cold resistance of the Colorado snow began to act as a natural physical therapy that no expensive surgery could ever replicate. By the time the first flowers of spring began to poke through the melting Colorado ice, Achilles was no longer the broken creature Marcus and Sarah had rescued from that Phoenix hellhole. The limp that everyone said was permanent had almost completely vanished, replaced by a confident, rhythmic stride that commanded respect from every dog in the neighborhood. He had become their living fortress, a guardian angel with 110 pounds of pure muscle and a heart that beat only for the two people who saved him. Marcus will never forget the night a stranger got too close to their porch, and Achilles let out a growl that rattled the windows and vibrated through the very foundation of the house. It was the first time they heard his true voice, a primal warning that he would never let anyone hurt his family. This wasn't just a sound, it was the roar of a king who had reclaimed his throne after a decade of forced silence. He now loves the local trips to the lake, digging his massive paws into the sand with a frantic energy, finally understanding that toys are gifts of love, not threats of pain. Sarah remembers the first time he actually picked up a plush toy without flinching. He held it with such surgical precision, as if he were carrying something sacred, his eyes welling up with a newfound realization that he was finally allowed to own something beautiful. Every morning, Achilles performs a silent patrol of every room, pressing his cold nose against their hands just to ensure his world is still safe. To see him now, curling his scarred body around their feet, is a miracle that restores faith in the power of second chances. He was once a discarded tool, a breeding machine left to die in the shadows. But today, he is the king of their home and the soul of their family. He taught Marcus and Sarah that no matter how long you have been locked in a cage, it is never too late to find your way to the snow and learn how to run. What would you do if you saw a dog as broken as Achilles in a shelter? Tell me in the comments below.